Welcome back to the Incredible Machines podcast, where we sit down with incredible people doing incredible things. Today we converse with Marc Stöckli, an entrepreneur, EO global leader, and author of Make Boards Work. We talk about why entrepreneurs resist being told what to do, discipline, and lessons learned from the Swiss Army, making boards work. So settle in to an episode filled with leadership shares, entrepreneurial wisdom, and practical lessons on building stronger teams, better boards, and more trusted spaces. Let's dive in with the incredible Marc Stöckli.
And worldwide, it's like I've served so long in EO and done so much. There's there's dozens and dozens, I guess, that some have a good view and some not so. But that's life.
So and one of the things I think you saw my message to you as well, because you were in your session. I was running like 10 minutes late, like the traffic was caught. But I was explained in 2019 when I was going for training with Marc that it was like, you have to be there, otherwise the door gets locked and shut, and shut and locked, and you're done. So, that's
I had a very well, yes. I mean, but actually, we're actually instructed to be strict on time, and what I like about it is I really always tied back in the training. I tied back to our core value of trust and respect, because if you think of it, if it's a group of say 8 people, and I show up late, implicitly my message is my time is more important than yours. And I really think that's not proper, right? Yeah. But I had a very painful exercise or kind of experience along those lines. A long time ago, I did a training in Cape Town, or a series of trainings in Cape Town. And it was exactly such an incident where somebody showed up late, and I said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but the rules are clear, and you're late, and you cannot participate." And in 2022, Ignite here in Durban, I meet her again, and I only learned then, and that's like 6-7 years later than the occasion. And I felt very terrible, and I thought she would hate me and things. And she said, "No, not at all. But just so you know, it was a real emergency. My kid was sick, and I need, I think she's a single mom. So I felt terrible. But she didn't hold any grudge. She said, you're right. You couldn't know, and the rules are the rules. And so it made me feel very, very quite guilty, actually.
Yeah, I feel guilty coming in late. That's why, like, when I message you, I say I'm 10 minutes out, because it actually creates anxiety in me.
Yes.
Like if I'm running late, because I have that. I actually don't mind people being late.
Okay.
I don't mind it for me.
Right.
I don't know if it's but for other people, like if my wife and I, it starts fights and stuff like that. We have arguments about because I'm like, we have to be there on the time we said we're on the time. But and I think it never used to be like that. I changed, and I get it from the training. Marc was the onboarding sort of training for me in 2019, and I said, and I'm doing a bunch of training now. He's out from Switzerland, and we're doing it. And we've got a workshop tomorrow on deep dives, and the trainings that I've gotten throughout EO, but I can still remember the first one that you did. And I said, I've got great lessons from that I still explain. And when I explain, like, experience shares what they are, I reference what I've learned from there and built on. So we talk to entrepreneurs a lot on this podcast, and we'll go back and discuss your lifeline, your where you're born, and everything like that. But we have we have a few things that we talk about, like the disagreeability as a trait of a entrepreneur, and creativity, conscientiousness, so getting things done, that sort of thing. But the disagreeability ties in quite nicely, I think, with the experience shares, because I explained to people that that entrepreneurs don't listen to shoulds generally.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
So that's,
yes.
I'd love your definition on experience share and why it works. But like, so it's one of the things I've got out of it was that we wouldn't listen to it. We want to give them, but we wouldn't listen to them necessarily. You'd love to be more open and listen to them more. But we wouldn't listen to them, and also the attachment to the advice. Advice is you're attaching yourself to it. So I don't know if you could give your definition?
Yeah, I happily try. And I fully agree with you. I think entrepreneurs are truly resenting advice very, very frequently, very often, right? And it's clear because we solve our own issues, we're driven, right? And advice is basically somebody else telling me what to do. And I think for many entrepreneurs, that's the core driver why they became entrepreneurs in the first place, to not to be told what to do. And maybe I share a very, very simple and very mundane example, talking about, say, vacation or reading a book. If I meet a friend of mine and we start talking about vacation, they say, oh, I took my family to southern France and we had a blast, it was very good. You need to go there. My gut reaction is, fuck you, right? Who are you to tell me where I spend my vacation? Yeah. But when instead the same friend shares his experience in detail specifically, why they enjoyed it, why the kids had a blast, what they did, I become curious and I might say, okay, I want to try that. So I'm much more susceptible, I'm much more open to invite experience shares. And there's a inherent kind of resistance to it. Same with reading a book. Like if we talk about a book, and I tell you, oh, you have to read this. I'm not sure how productive that is, but when I share with you how much I got out of this book and why it appeals so much, I think that's much more powerful.
And I think it ties into your book, where which we'll talk about later. But the hierarchy that it instructs. What is it? It implies hierarchy when you give advice, because you should do.
You go away from eye level to some sort of hierarchy. You know better. I know better, right?
Yeah.
That's inherent in advice, and oftentimes that's not overly healthy.
Okay. Okay, perfect. I love that. When did you know you were an entrepreneur, you were like this? When did it first come to you?
I'm a latecomer to entrepreneurship. I've in EO, where we both, that's where we know each other from. We have so many entrepreneurs that basically were cleared to become at 16, 18, broke off their studies and started doing something, selling whatever, PCs and in the old days of technology, or trading this or trading that and whatever. I had a pretty successful professional career before that. I studied a lot. I have a double degree. I have a law degree as well as an MBA from the Wharton School. I worked in investment banking in Hong Kong and Tokyo and New York. I then switched into strategy consulting with BCG. Had kind of a jet set, high life, boardrooms and high level, very high salary at young age and all that. And only then did I switch into entrepreneurship. I was at BCG. I was about 1 year away from being elected partner. And it really gave me pause. And I thought, okay, if I go that way, you get the golden handcuffs, right? Then it becomes really difficult to switch because it's so well paid and you're so ingrained. I had an offer from a client at the time, very similar, very high level, very huge package, and I felt, okay, what else is there? And there was this a bit of a kind of say eagerness and energy to say, okay, as a consultant, you advise, right? You give advice, you consult, you share an analysis and proposals and all that, and you do a lot of PowerPoint. I said, okay, maybe it's time to stop writing PowerPoints, roll up the sleeve, and actually do something. And coincidentally, at the very same time, I met one of the co-founders that I started my first company with a technical expertise that matched perfectly with my idea, right? So that's really the start of entrepreneurship for me. But it was late. I was not. I had done quite a bit before that. Okay,
cheapest. Okay, I did not know that. That's great. In terms of if we can go further back now, and we'll get to the 16-year-old self question and that sort of thing. You've had some time to think about that, but so born and raised in Switzerland.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes.
And how was that? How was growing up in Switzerland? We know nothing.
Some people talk of Switzerland as paradise, and I don't think there's any place called paradise truly. But Switzerland probably comes very close, and maybe closer than many other places to paradise. And I think very blessed to have been born in Switzerland. middle class, very, very sorrow-free life as a kid and as a young, as a teenager. Really, school was a breeze, intact home, loving family. We didn't, how to say, at the time, we didn't show love so much, and especially as a boy, don't show too much emotions. So I learned that much later in life, also in EO, to talk openly about my emotions. But I still had a very healthy childhood. 2 sisters, everything fine. House, a lot of time to play. School was a breeze. I happened to be, school was very easy for me. I excelled at school. Had sports, did fairly well in tennis, enjoyed that. So for with a few, minor setbacks, I had a very, very privileged upbringing as in Switzerland.
I remember seeing a picture in one of your presentations with pictures of your now family and home and that, and it looked like you. In Switzerland, I always think you must ski, you must snowboard. Was that right? In snowboarding?
Yes, that's a picture of actually it's race snowboard.
And then
hard boots.
Behind the boat as well. You were behind
water
the boat.
ski.
Water
yes.
ski, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I also ski. I am
Okay.
Swiss, so I also ski.
Yes. I know there's a big distinction. Have you ever been snowboarding or skiing? I've actually never done it, and I've been told, what? It's just incredible, and it links me to that paradise. What about that word paradise stood out for me? Like Switzerland is as close to. What about it? Is that
look for one, for example? I think it's still one of the very safe places to grow up, and it was even much more so when I was a kid. Literally, our house was never locked. Right, we had the cars out front with the key in the ignition. I would never lock my bicycle. Those days are gone, right? In Switzerland as well,
okay.
right? Then we have very intact nature. We have excellent schooling system. We have an excellent kind of stability. Political system is extremely stable. A lot of very, very democratic elements. It's very federalistic. So the health system is very robust. So there's just so many structural elements that are impressive and make it just very, very easy to live and very comfortable.
Okay, and weather, beautiful. It's freezing cold, but beautiful summers.
Yes, the weather is not as stable. Even in summer, if you host a party, typically in Switzerland, it's a bit risky to rely on it being good weather. Even in summer, you can have a bad day, or you can have a few days or a week of rain. So the predictability is less because we're close to the mountains, right? We have the Alps, so
yes.
Weather can change quite quickly, right? But yeah, I like seasons. I must say, I wouldn't. I've lived in tropical places. I've spent time near the equator. I like that we have the seasons. I like the change of seasons.
It's interesting you like Durban. I mean, the Hillcrest sounds similar. Someone in the team called the weather around the area we're in right now is labeled it bipolar, and it makes absolute sense to me. It was like, you don't know. It's exactly like that. You couldn't plan an outdoor event for the afternoon. You wouldn't know what was coming. Yeah. Okay, perfect. But there was something. I know you had military background. Is that the next? Is that a requirement of?
Yes.
After you do schooling,
we have a militia system comparable to Singapore, for example, or Israel, where it's mandatory to serve. In Switzerland, it's men that is compulsory to serve, not females. They can voluntarily, females can serve as well, but it's mandatory for men. The system has changed a little bit, but I did more than and the way it works, you have a basic training, and then you're basically on active reserve for a certain time, right? Okay. And they be called, in a worst case scenario, that reserve would be called in again to serve, which led at the time when I did my basic trainings in the army, we still had about 450,000 of people possibly enlisted in the army for a small country, right? That's a very sizable army. It's much lower now. I did more. I went on to become an officer. I actually was the youngest officer in the army at the time in Switzerland because I had skipped a few grades, so I did everything a bit early. And for me, I think the two most important positive aspects of my army service, one, one of my closest friends is from Army service. We served together, and when you serve together for several hundred days, you know who you can trust and you know who has your back. That's really rock solid. That's one. And second, really takeaway for all of my life, I took away a lot of leadership lessons. Because what happens is, because I did that early, I led about 60, 65 grown men at age of 20. And if you do an internship, it can be a fantastic internship at age 20, but typically you're not going to lead 60 people. So I learned a lot. I could hone my leadership skill of in the Army. We talked a little bit about that, leading by example, like lead from the front, right? Leaders eat last, the kind of doctrine and thinking. And I really got a lot of inputs and learnings from my Army service.
Yeah, we're talking about that Simon Sinek book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And your book, I think, cites it, and yeah, it's a beautiful read. That very interesting, and he does reference, and I don't know if he served, but he has a lot of connections to the Army, so he's able to extract relevant stories and that sort of thing. It's very interesting. Were you as disciplined before, or did you feel more disciplined afterwards? Is it? Discipline, I think all of us are more disciplined on some things, a bit less on others, right? It has to do with passions and affinities and things. I think I've always been quite aspirational and kind of pursuing goals and quite persistent in pursuing these things. And I think with that comes, because that only works with discipline. But I think, again, it's a thing the Army helps, and some parts of that are silly, like, keeping your things in order and the whole structure. But there is a purpose. Like there's this book by this a U.S. general, and he talks about one of the things that first thing in the morning, make my bed. Right? And he says it's a silly habit. You can laugh about it, but he creates a rhythm. He creates starting a day with a small little accomplishment and sets the tone for the day. I think it's a nice picture for that. Yeah, no, I love that. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I actually do that. I follow that. I love that. Is one check, one win, done, like that, and you
Beautiful.
Carry on.
Exactly. And I do that. I still do that. And I also, I have two kids. They're 14 and 13, or 14 and a half and close to 13. And it's something, a little thing I try to insist on and say, okay, make your beds.
Yeah. Agreed. The reason I ask about the discipline is because we used to have the draft, like you would have to serve time here in the Army, and they did away with it in the late 80s, early 90s, I think. And I often wonder, as horrific as some of the stories I heard, and some people it just wasn't right for, but I often wonder if it would have been right for some other people, including myself included. I actually wonder. I don't know if I would have been able to put up with it, because all I wanted to do was go travel the world and surf and find waves and that sort of thing. But
see, one thing I took away also from the Army is a very, very strong affinity to this work hard, play hard mindset. I mean, we worked really hard in the Army with many, many long days, and also physically tough, mentally tough, and things. But we also took time to play hard, to really, do silly stuff and all that. I think that duality of things is powerful. It's good.
Something I didn't pick up, but it came to me now as you were speaking about it. But it was and my wife actually opened this fortune cookie recently, and we found it
the wisdom from fortune cookies.
Yeah. But it was hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And it's interesting when people literally say, like, I'm Switzerland in this. They use that as an example of the piece, the not bipartisan, like not taking sides. But it sounds like, and I'm ignorant on this, so I apologize. But your military is incredible. It reminds me again. I'm going to jump to one more quote. It reminds me of this Jordan Peterson quote where he talks about you must be dangerous, but you must have that danger under voluntary control.
Yes.
Have you heard that? So it sounds like the training is essential, but you probably will never use. But you again prepare for the worst.
Yes, I mean, and that the whole doctrine of the Swiss Army has always been to be strong enough to deter possible enemies from attacking, right? That has been kind of the doctrine. We have very few. Basically, we don't have offensive capabilities, and we have no intention, right? We're neutral. We're a neutral country, but it's the real concept is armed neutrality, with the thinking that you cannot be credibly neutral with no protection whatsoever. Right, so it's very deep, and what plays in our favor, of course, is the topography. While with the Alps, there's very few. You know, maybe somebody else has. I don't know. So many more. Warfare has changed a lot, right? We learned a lot in Ukraine how warfare has changed. But in more traditional, in tanks, you know, there's not so many planes that you can really use a lot of tanks. Say and the Alpine corridors, the Alps, make it quite difficult to establish air superiority if you're not used to flying in mountainous territories.
Okay, interesting. And then, so from military, you never you didn't get called into armed service or anything, or did you?
No, because I mean the Swiss Army has not been in wars for a very long time, right? So I don't have war experience, but I have armed services experience. Yes.
From there, you mentioned you went the corporate route. So
yes. Yes.
Before we get there, actually, because one of the questions we ask often, it's before you get there, if you could go back to someone slightly younger than that military service, the 16-year-old version of you, and tell them something.
Okay.
What would it be?
I think that many things come to mind, and I think one thing that I really think, especially at that age, I think is and I already mentioned that, is really this work hard, play hard mindset. I think you really work hard for your goals, be disciplined, put in, There's this quote. There's no shortcut to any place worth going, right? There's no workaround for hard work, right? And I think emphasize that. But at the same time, I think it's also every once in a while it's also important to step back and let go and be a bit light, and whatever passion it is, if it's sports or reading or the arts or whatever, also pursue that and really also play hard.
Okay, awesome. And so we'll go back to that where we were transitioning there to the corporate life. So you studied. Did you study in military, or because you were there for a while?
No. That's in Switzerland. That's not an option, right?
Okay.
You serve. You pick. You're selected into different type of troops, and you training. And then, as I said, there's additional trainings or the repetition courses. That's the rhythm. I was with what's called mobile artillery, so mobile howitzers. Which is quite technical, quite interesting also intellectually, because you shoot over very long distances, so it needs to be very accurate and all that. Quite interesting. But I studied, my first degree is a law degree.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's a law degree with a lot of combined with economics and very tilted towards commercial law, business law.
Perfect. And then that put you in position to go into corporate.
I chose, initially I thought I would study economics and business. Then after 1 year, I switched in the same university. I decided to study law. I never intended to practice law. I never intended to become a lawyer, but I was more impressed by the law faculty. I found it more demanding. I found it more logical. So that plays to my interests. But I always wanted to go into business. So the last 2 years during my studies, which is necessary to get some practical experience, I worked in Hong Kong in corporate finance, investment banking already. And I worked the last 2 years of studying in St. Gallen. I worked towards securing a position in Japan. I want to work in Japan in corporate finance, which I learned after about 1 year of building my network to get there. Basically, everybody told me it's impossible. And it's a case where I continued to work hard and was kind of persistent, and I just didn't give up and looked for references and all that. In the end, it worked out. I got a scholarship. I won a scholarship. I got a role. I actually was entered into Toyota, which is by far the most prestigious company in Japan at the time. Not even close, right? And they're also very conservative. So why it worked there, it's still a puzzle. I know it was decided at a very, very high level, at kind of what would you call the CFO level. I mean, unheard of for my junior role. But I got to work there for 1.5 years, and I had one of the most amazing times of my life. And then I went to work a summer in New York in investment banking, and then I started Wharton and did my MBA at the Wharton School.
And then from there, consulting.
And then I switched into strategy consulting. Exactly.
Consulting. Yes. And is that for a firm? Yes.
Yes. BCG, used to be called Boston Consulting Group. BCG is one of the well-known or premier strategy firms. Yes.
And we were speaking in the car right over here about that it was 600,000 miles a year for about 5 or 6 years. You did.
Yes, thereabouts. So I very early on developed a bit of a very specialized niche that I would work for Swiss or European financial services firms, but their Asia division. I had worked and lived in Hong Kong and Japan. I spoke a decent not by far not perfect, but some Japanese, which is quite rare for Westerners, especially at the time. So I got into this niche a bit by luck, and I really had all my projects, basically the majority of the work, being handled in APAC, Hong Kong, Singapore, Tokyo, Melbourne, Sydney, whatever it is, the financial centers. But the head office relationship was still in Switzerland or in Europe. And that led to the teams being kind of mostly in Asia, but the head office relationship that I led more in Switzerland or Europe, which led to a lot of commute.
Okay. That's you were saying that we talked quite extensively about this actually. I don't know, but do you have any, what were your 3 travel tips? This could have been a question for the thing if I'd known, what do you do?
Well, I had, I don't think that's applicable in all cases, but I had a period where I was, in the same week, I would be a few days in Zurich, in Tokyo, and in New York. Zurich was where I had my base, where I lived, at least on paper. I lived more in the plane, but on paper I lived in Zurich at the time. And I had 2 suits in the Four Seasons in New York and 2 suits in the New Otani in Tokyo. So I never took anything. I just took a few fresh shirts, but I traveled much lighter than even normally. I never checked in luggage. But I think the most important travel routines from the time had really to do with preventing jet lag. So, for example, one routine I do, and still to this day, is on the exact moment of taking off, I reset my watch to the destination time. And with that, it triggers me also to mentally switch to destination time. And that, I think, that helped me a lot. I always said, I know there's physical elements of jet lag, but I think with the appropriate mindset, I can combat a lot of the jet lag symptoms without any medicine. I never took any melatonin or anything. Never.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great one. So set your watch for the landing zone. Okay. So, and then you mentioned earlier that you, I don't know if we had started recording yet, but you met your business partner. You were about to get this golden handcuffs, as you talk about, partner, and you met your first business partner with your first company, entrepreneur. As I understand, that's the cybersecurity business. Am I right?
Yes, although it had a failed predecessor. I mean, we did start, and at the core of the first company was broader than cybersecurity, and we started as a founding team of 4. And relatively soon, we realized that it was more 2 and 2. There were 2 more senior partners, more established in lives already, having accumulated some wealth, more means, and Volker would become my CTO, and I more on the junior side, a bit earlier in their career. And we realized that our values did not align, and also we struggled commercially. And what happened is we actually decided and managed to get kind of a restart, which is actually my first instance where I got fascinated by boards. The day was really, it was a very famous day, or infamous day, probably more likely, known as 9/11. We had a board meeting that day. And so far, the board had not impressed me at all. It was mainly built by myself. I was in the lead for that in our business. And it was really well-known, iconic Swiss business people. So on paper, it looked like a crazy board for such a young, small company. But not much happened. But on 9/11, in that board meeting, where we actually made the crucial decision that allowed us to split and part ways and restart in a different setup, very complicated, the board stepped up. and really help to get this going. And that was actually during the board meeting we learned about the attacks and went down to watch. So it was the same day, and that really that incident sparked my passion and my interest in what's the difference between a board which doesn't work and a board that actually does work.
So one of the questions is, we're talking about boards, but and your book is about boards. Why are boards so important? Mm-hmm. Like that's a big question for me. And I think we can segue into EO, because I understand my forum to be my board. Yes. So I don't know if that's something you at all you can speak to.
Yeah, I think there's overlap, and there's clearly differences between a commercial board of directors and the forum, right? In a commercial board of directors, you have roles, you have some interests. You don't. The forum is much more neutral, right? So there's a big difference. Where does the role or the value of a board come in? I think one very important, there's the legal size, right? The supervision, and that's changes depending on jurisdiction, what exactly, how that works, what the legal role is, who sets strategy, is it the board or is it the CEO and her executive team? There's variations depending on where you operate. So that supervision part, that is important, but that's more a legal question. My interest is more in the behavioral aspects and kind of and the functional aspects. What does it really take for a board to work? And I think one dimension where a board can add immense value is that it has a different perspective, right? The CEO and his team, the CEO and her team, they lead the business operationally. They run the business day by day, not 24/7, but really all the time, right? They know the customers, they know the employees, they know the suppliers, they know the processes, they're totally in it. The board is a few steps removed from that. The board does not engage in that intensity, right? They're not there every single day, right? It's not their role. Now, obviously, that leads to the board knowing the business a bit less most of the time, right? But that knowing less, if played well, can be a huge advantage, right? Sometimes when you're in it, you don't see the forest for the tree. And the board can come in and help the executive team to see the forest for the tree by asking questions, by bringing in a different perspective. I call this the luxury of distance, right? And I think that's one crucial, again, that needs to be played right. It's not automatic, but that's an area, a structural element of where a board can add immense value. A board can also have kind of complementary skills and experiences, right? Very often, again, we establish the executive team, they will know the business better, right? But maybe they have never done M&A. Maybe they have never done an acquisition. But maybe the board has. Maybe some board members, have that experience and have done it 10 times, 20 times themselves. So that's an area where they can then really bring even topical expertise to the benefit of the executive team.
Okay, awesome. One of the things I found interesting was that board understanding the way your book had outlined the circles of safety and the hierarchies, and even in giving. I understood it from an entrepreneurship point of view, but often the CEO might be quite disagreeable. So an experience share would really work for that type of person. Instead of, I think it was like, would you want someone from the head of the FDA? Yes, but you'd also want someone with the is it a Shoshin mindset? Do you want to?
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Of course. Maybe. Before I go a step back, sometimes I say for me that one of the most concise definitions of how I envisage a board's role to be, and again, not the legal part, right, is just say it's there to support and to challenge.
Okay.
Right? Challenge, again, in a positive way, a bit similar to forum mindset with positive intent. Not, I don't challenge the CEO to punish or to condescend or anything, but really for the best interest of the business, to advance the business, right?
Sorry to interrupt you, but like a business coach would be for an individual?
Can
coach,
be. Yes. Yeah, totally. So kind of come with a challenge to a budget and say, okay, fine, that's a plan. What else can we do, right? Again, not arrogant. We know better, and it has to be, but in a good way, right? But also support. we know. I mean, one reason we are in EO is we know the highs are high as entrepreneurs and the lows are low, right? And sometimes the right thing for a board to do is support, right? Have the teams back and strengthen them when they go through a valley of tears, right? And maybe pounding on more pressure is the wrong thing at that moment. They know already, right? So it can also be support. Now on Shoshin, right? Shoshin comes from Zen Buddhism from Japan, and it stands for beginner's mindset, right? And I think that's a quintessential mindset to integrate into the boardroom, to have in the board. And I want to come back to this notion of knowing things, that the executive team, they know the business very well, and maybe some board members have some deep domain expertise. Now, when that happens, you might become complacent or even arrogant. I know better, right? I don't need somebody to challenge me or to help me. I got this covered, right? And the Shoshi mindset, he kind of tries to contradict and says, yeah, maybe you know a lot, right? But why don't you listen? Like really actively, curiously listen for your own value, for new insights. Yes, on paper you know better, but that does not mean that person cannot add any value. I think a beautiful analogy to that is the curiosity that I saw your 4-year-old, right? Mm-mm. Everything's interesting. Right? Everything's interesting. And that's such a beautiful mindset to have, instead of, I know that, to switch your mind and says, okay, yes, I know some things, but I'm sure there's new learning in it for me.
Yeah, no, I love it, because you can be closer to first principles thinking.
Yes.
And you need understanding. You can challenge the status quo, even if it's coming from a place of like less hubris. I think you talk about it's very important.
Yeah. And again, sometimes the best questions come from the person who knows least, right? Because exactly that helps them to come up with a fresh perspective.
Yeah, and it sounded like there's so many intricacies in like the board. Like the one that I mentioned that stood out is the circles of safety, and I get that from Simon Sinek, and it's echoed there. You use it, and we use it in our training, and I use it like throughout. Like we it's not a Simon Sinek one that I use per se. Forget who actually says it, but it'll come to me. But it's when we have conflict in the business, we'll do criticize in private, praise in public.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we mentioned that in the training yesterday. That it was in your training. It was like there was something that needed to be private. It can be quite important. One of the things that came up was, I find very interesting, and I could definitely see it happening, is when the CEO is pitching on they've got to present a new idea, or they're coming with new budgets or whatever, they've got a task to come and present to the board. If the board, like a little thing where the board might walk in and they've all got the same coffee takeaways, and it appears that they've been to the same place and they've already come to there's a foregone conclusion coming. How do you litigate for that? What do you do for that?
I had exactly such an experience a while ago. I was chairing a company board in the Patek area, related to leveraging technology for cancer treatment, and exactly that scenario happened. We had a board meeting. I was there with the two co-founders. We had a lunch together before, and then all the other directors, who all were investors in their A round, jointly came late, not heavy late, but a few minutes late. And that board meeting turned antagonistic very, very quickly. What happened basically is one of the two co-founders who led the meeting, led the board meeting from the operational side as a co-CEO, but that's his role. Became very suspicious and started very suspicious, as kind of they had met before and kind of aligned on some things, and kind of felt threatened. So he reacted, kind of pushing back, and it very quickly kind of escalated and got very tense. I did not do well in that board meeting. I sensed the tension and that antagonism, and I let it go for too long. before I actually stopped and took a time out. And from then on, it got a lot better. But I waited too long. As board chair, I should have stepped in earlier because I sensed it, but I didn't step in, or I stepped in late, let's say. So, just human psychology, right? Basically, what happened is people took assumptions. They were not necessarily right, but they worked on their assumptions and let kind of the feelings take hold, and they deteriorated.
And probably that's a visual cue. We mentioned the same coffee cup, so they've been at the same coffee shop. But that would a clearing been a way to? How would you have
Totally, frankly, even a one-word open would have surfaced a lot of that.
Okay,
right? Maybe that person would have said annoyed, or whatever it was. And possibly out of that, what do you want to talk quickly? Well, they all showed up late, and it looks like they gang up on something, right? Whoa, right?
I'll stop you there, because for the listeners that are not EO members or not part of our team,
yes.
Can you take us through a one-word opener? And
yes,
what it is?
It's a very simple thing we do at the start of forum. We basically take a pulse check of the room, in the sense of going around the room, asking everybody to state in one word, that's why it's called one-word opening, their current frame of mind, their current state of mind, right? And it might be curious or energized, or might be concerned or stressed or things. And there are signals in there, right? If something comes up that is a bit of a warning sign, an orange flag, I would pick on it and say, do you want to quickly talk about it? And many times, just by explaining it for 1 or 2 sentences, you lose 30 seconds, but you help that person to be fully present in the meeting.
100%. I mean, again, I learned that from you. So, and we use it, and I've been using it since 2019 when I did my training. I did with teams, and I remember the first time I presented it to my management, and my partner at the time was maybe a bit old school in his thinking. I said, we need to ask people how they're feeling. And he said, you can't ask people how they're feeling. And I said, why? And I said, what happens if he came back at me very sharply. He was like, what happens if they say they're suicidal? Yeah. And I was like, well, that would be terrible to hear, but it would be the best thing, because then we could do something, because people that are suicidal don't generally tell other people.
Correct.
And
Absolutely.
then they go do stupid things.
Yeah.
And if you tell us, so I've got trigger words with my team. We do the one word, and I want to share the next thing with you, which I've learned along the way from somebody else. But we do the one word every day, stand up, and it's a presencing exercise. I love it. So it allows me to know how I am, and it's, like you said, it's a signal for the team. Yeah. If someone says overwhelmed, that I'll stay behind with that person, because that's not a great place to be. So there's certain things like that. So I love it. The one I want to share with you, and I don't know if I have shared this, but it was I got it from a woman at Unilever who managed teams, and she's an incredible machine as well. But it's yesterday's best. Mm-hmm. So we do one word, and then we do yesterday's best. Okay. And yesterday's best is anything that happened yesterday. Yeah. That's the best thing. Like what was it?
A highlight of yesterday.
And during COVID with teams, sometimes it was that they went to sleep. Yes. Like they were using loved ones, and so it was difficult. Yeah. Right. But what it did was we found it does two things. So it's a gratitude exercise, like a presencing,
absolutely,
presencing, and now gratitude.
Yes,
because you get to think about why yesterday was so great, but it also doubles as the one word. Why the one word's so brilliant is it's got multiple layers, but it doubles as a team building exercise, because in a way, or because our developer will say best yesterday was the lasagna. Best lasagna.
Yes.
And we go, okay, cool. We know he likes Italian now, so that's what we're going to build. We're going to probably book an Italian restaurant, or
absolutely beautiful. We get to know each other better, right? Yeah, so, absolutely. And that's a very, again, for the boardroom dynamics that I'm very passionate about. That's a very often neglected angle of board dynamics, right? In the boardroom, when we operate in the boardroom, we mainly it's business oriented, right? So if you dissect trust, how is trust built? What is needed for trust? There's really two facets to trust. One is sometimes labeled as competency-based trust. And then there's the other side that is personal. There's character-based or personal trust, right? Now, you need both. For true trust, you need both. But in the boardroom, in the formal part of the board meeting, you only build competency-based trust, possibly, right? So how do you build? For that, you need a joint lunch. You need a joint dinner. You need maybe go for a walk together. You need to get to know each other as a personal level, that I know that you like lasagna and that I can relate to, right? So that is very often, I think, a bit neglected, right? We're very business oriented, get things done, focus on the matters at hand. But the other aspect is very crucial, because trust is a very, very important currency in the boardroom.
So I think that's really important. I got that out of the book now, but if you could just elaborate a little bit further on that, because I understood that like the other form of trust, and you can tell me the difference in the other one, is more easily found in family businesses, because they'll have built that, and then they don't have the competency.
Often, but in the family, it even can cut the other way around as well. But there might be some family baggage in there that even tarnishes the personal trust. But oftentimes, families completely trust each other on the integrity side, on the reliability side, on the personal side. They know each other and think. But sometimes they take shortcuts, and they favor possibly a family member over an outsider to play a key role, and sometimes competence falls short, right? Whereas non-family businesses oftentimes have the other problem, where they say, okay, we're highly competent, we have the right people, but they don't know if they can trust them personally. Right? Are they truly reliable? Are they truly integral? Do they pursue some weird agenda that is not in the best interest of the company?
Yeah. There's a book, actually. I don't know if it's a Stephen Covey.
Yes. Speed of Trust. Yes, that's where that's where a lot of this foundation comes from. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Phenomenal book. Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, a little anecdote on trust building and the importance of it. Another company, we had a board strategy workshop in actually also in Berlin, and we met the evening before, and for the first time in a new constellation. And we deliberately, or I asked the founders, I was chairing that board as well, and we had a kind of a private dining room, simple restaurant, very cozy, and we just got to know each other a little bit. And at some point, I pulled out something I use in form training that you might remember. It's a game called the Ungame, which is nothing but a set of cards with so-called icebreaker questions. And I took that out and said, well, now we're going to play a game. And, seasoned venture capitalists, hard-nosed business people were a bit, skeptical, and what esoteric stuff is Marc pulling up here and things. I just insisted on it and said, bear with me, show me some grace, that's what we're going to do. So we played a few rounds, flip the cards, read the icebreaker question and respond to it. And, the first round was quite awkward, quite a bit of passive aggression and, kind of type of thing. And then they got into it. And we played a few rounds and really enjoyed. And after dessert, actually, I said, let's play one more round. And the next day, that board strategy workshop went sour very quickly. And what happened was they just had done an investment, and the investors felt that the company was drifting in a different direction, kind of was pivoting somewhere else than they invested in. So there a lot of suspicion arose and got very, very tense. And we only managed to save the day through this trust that we built the evening before. If not, I mean, I have no certainty, but I'm very certain it could have set the whole company at risk, right? And the key learning from that is trust is something that you build over time, right? And you need to build it in good times, because that's much easier to build, because you need to be able to draw on it in tough times. So I look at trust as like a trust account. Like we have a bank account, right? I need to pay in good times, so I have some reserves to draw on in bad times. And the same is with trust in the boardroom. I need to build that deliberately, so I have some reserves when I need it, when the hits the fan, right?
Has that echo of the military training and being dangerous, but not having to use that danger?
Yeah. I think there's some, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm excited to see your ad just now, but before we get there, because I want the part that you'd the thought starters or openers, why are they so important? Like the trust, but And what is a good example of, or do you have a favorite?
There's many. There's a bit lighter ones that don't go too much into vulnerability and personal. Might be like share a compliment that you've received recently, or what put a smile on your face recently. And then it can go a bit more personal, kind of how would your mom describe you? How would your dad describe you? What 3 things would you like to have achieved in 3 years' time? And then can go even deeper, right? So you can really select kind of how much contemplation, how much reflection, how much vulnerability you want to have in there. But they're a playful way to approach that. And you connect, you get to know each other better, and you open up. And that makes you personal, that makes you human, not just a board director. And that's where trust starts to emerge.
And in the book, there's a few exercises, the start, stop, continue. So I don't know if you could explain that. That would be great for people to understand. And as well as there was one where, and I didn't get this, I don't think I've ever done the exercise, but the member would need to face another direction and you speak.
Yes. So start, stop, continue. Actually, there's two exercises called start, stop, continue that have very, very different use case. They're also a different thing. They just have the same name. One is it's a framework for giving feedback. So at the end of a board meeting or any meeting, you can frame the feedback. How did the meeting go in the start, stop, continue framework? Kind of, for next time, let's start doing something, let's stop doing that thing, and let's continue doing that. So it's a feedback framework. The other one, which is a personal kind of reflection thing, is that, say, if we're a group of 5, I prepare a start, stop, continue for the other 4. So I take a card, for example, I write John on it, and from knowing you, from having worked with you, I write 3 feedback sentences. The first one will start with start doing something, stop doing another thing, and continue doing something, as my observation of your behavior. Again, from good intent in our EO context, kind of my observation, my perception of what you could be doing to grow, to personally grow, right? So it's a very structured framework to provide insights, and it can lead to recognizing blind spots, right? It can provide a lot of information for me to increase my self-awareness. So that's how Start, Stop, Continue kind of works. Yeah.
And then that exercise with the back towards...
yes, so that is a derivative of an exercise that I don't like, and which is not an EO tool, which is kind of this chair exercise where somebody sits with the back to the group and they talk about this person as if that person is not around. That can be helpful and can also raise a lot of blind spots, but it can also be very damaging.
Yeah.
So we don't do it. We don't do it in EO. There's too much downside.
Okay.
It can break a form, right? If you talk about this person, there might be things that judgment comes in, right? There's heavy judgment in that.
Okay.
So that can really break a group. It can provide fantastic insights as well. I'm not discrediting that, but there's also significant downside risk, right? So we did the derivative of this, kind of same setting, kind of semicircle chair. But we limit it to positive, to gratitude, to what do we appreciate about the person. Yeah. So it's a fantastic energy. It can be, for example, if you go on a retreat, it can be an amazing starting point to start on a very positive need. You're basically basking in positivity, right? Sometimes it's called golden shower. My kids have that in school. Sometimes just positive attributes that people think about them. So it's very uplifting, very empowering, and sets a very positive tone.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for that. In terms of, before we get to your ad, I just wanted to go through, you haven't touched on meeting your wife, you've got kids.
Yes,
where
with
did
pleasure.
that fit into the story?
Yes. So the funny thing is, my wife and I met because we went to the same business school. But we didn't meet at the business school. She did her MBA at Wharton a bit later than me. And after that, so she was born and raised in Shanghai. Then very interestingly and very impressively left China alone with no money and with $300 at age 18 to go to US because she hates authoritarian regimes and she's not very fond of communism. So she left, went to the United States, fought her way through, kind of starting at bad schools, going to a little bit less bad, good schools, eventually made it to Wharton, and then did her last semester at Wharton in Spain, and stayed in Spain, worked in Spain for 4.5 years, and then came to Switzerland. And that's where we met, at the Wharton alumni event. I served as Wharton Alumni Club president at the time, so every once in a while it's worthwhile to volunteer. And that's how we met, and that's how we fell in love. So, sometimes people ask you, well, was it worthwhile to pursue an MBA? That's a very easy question to respond to in our case. Yes. And yes, we have 2 kids, 14 and 13, roughly. A bit more than 14, a bit less than 13. Yes.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so maybe let's head into the ad. There are a few other things that I've got stuff from the notebook to check this out. But if we just look at this ad, and this ad we're going to describe to you guys, but it'll be in the notes because it is a. There are TVCs or TV commercial versions, but this is a print version. I think you said often in the back of magazines that you would have been on flights with, huh?
Yes, I've all my life I've been reading a magazine called The Economist, which in my view is still the highest level or highest quality journalism I know. I really read it kind of every week, almost religiously. I'm not in the narrow sense of the word, but very diligently. And very often the last page is that ad. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So do you want to say the quote?
Sure. The quote is, before I reveal the brand, is, it's actually in there, so I can't separate it. It's really, you never actually own a Patek Philippe, you merely look after it for the next generation. Patek Philippe, for those who don't know, it's a very upscale Swiss watch brand, beautiful, long history, family-owned forever, immense history. It's one of the most prestigious watches, kind of, I would say, the analogy to probably it's the Ferrari of watches, or even Bugatti or whatever, kind of the really the highest level. What I find, so maybe when I was elected global chairman in EU, when that term started and a little bit before it started and when it started, so many people at the president meetings approached me and says, "Marc, what will be your legacy?" That really gave me pause and made me think about it, and says, it's not about me leaving a legacy. I'm serving I'm serving, but it's a finite term. It's not about my legacy at all. My job is to leave the organization in better hands, right? To leave it in better hands than when I take it over. We're like stewards of the organization. I don't lead this organization. I'm not the boss of this organization. I'm a steward of this organization. And I think that encapsulates that perfectly, right? In a family more tradition. By the way, I mean, commercially, and you're much more marketing savvy than I am, I find it mind-boggling. Basically, what they do with this slogan is they make you feel really good about spending $100,000 or $500,000 on a watch, right? Because you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it. I do it for my son or for my daughter, right? I mean, how smart is that?
And
right?
It's incredible. It is incredible. And I mean, just one of those executions is exactly that, where they've got you looking at, it's not, I'm not buying. This is going to be a family heirloom. That's what it is.
Exactly.
I'm creating
so I'm completely
legacy.
Excused of doing a crazy purchase, right?
I have to do. I can do it because it's going to be an heirloom. It's a legacy. This will be something that my son will pass on to his son.
Exactly.
And I love it. So that's essentially why you chose that ad and why you love that ad. I actually love to see how they execute across in the TV commercials, but I imagine it's just very beautifully shot, scenic, like this visual is here. And then we get to the quote. Mm-hmm. So I love this quote when you send it. Thanks. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Yes. Churchill.
Yes.
So why did you choose that?
There's so many facets to it. For one, all my life is one of the people I respect very highly. I'm fascinated by how he did the wartime prime minister. What he did for Europe, probably in history, is unparalleled. So the quote itself, for one, I think it completely encapsulates entrepreneurship, right? I mean, so much of entrepreneurship is resilience, is knocking up. I don't know who had a linear path to success as an entrepreneur. Maybe they exist. I don't know. I never met anybody in EO. We all fall flat on our noses a few times, typically, right? There's a Japanese proverb that says exactly that. It says, fall 7 times, get up 8. Right? It's the same thing. It encapsulates entrepreneurship. Everybody who made it in entrepreneurship had to get up again, dust off and get going again, right? But it also warns from complacency. The first part, success is not final, right? Warns us from complacency, right? The higher you go, the higher you might fall. And I think that's also in there. So I think that combination is very Churchillian, kind of concise, smart way. I just find it extremely inspiring.
Yeah. No, that's a new favorite for sure. I love it. I am aligned with your sentiment of being around entrepreneurs. So I'm going to look at the questions that we have out and like from the team and it is to do with the book. So let me just read this out. It says, Marc, you possess an incredible, almost machine-like discipline, where they're taking up copious notes across the hundreds of board meetings, blocking out every single morning. I think we talked about this on the travel days, exclusively for writing or drawing time from your drawing learnings from your time as an officer in the Swiss Army Mobile Artillery Unit, where you learned that nothing is left to chance. Okay. How does this rigorous, systematic military background translate to tactical board practices like the bar? So this is another acronym, and marketers, we love our acronyms too. So this acronym stands for Board After Action Review. And why is it so critical that boards systematically dissect this for their failure?
Maybe put the discipline part a bit in perspective. Funny enough, we had a long discussion on discipline today and different facets of discipline. And as we talked, as everybody else, like some things for me are more easy to be disciplined on than others. And I give you the book example. I think I did really well on writing the book. I had this discipline on all non-travel weeks. I blocked the mornings. I've really focused, and I had my ups and downs. I had productive days and less productive days, and all that given. But mostly I was really in a flow, and I felt like a bit sat back a few decades back at university, like deep work, real thinking, writing, very creative, very very concentrated, focused, really getting into this flow, into this zone, very very rewarding. I completely lost that when I had finished writing, because I completely underestimated that by having written the book, I was not done yet. My first book, right? I don't know I talk to people, but I completely underestimated the part that you also need to promote, right? You need to talk to publishers, and you need to get onto podcasts and write on LinkedIn and write Substack articles and all that stuff. That's much less my world, right? This is not my comfort zone. So I really had to learn how to get out of my comfort zone. And there I struggled. I didn't have this for a long time. I lost a lot of time by not mastering that discipline. Sometimes I am, but not all the time, right?
We have a saying for that. Sorry, just before we get to the acronym, there are people for that. So if it's a marketing agency or it seems. Yeah. Okay. So bar. So that is something that comes from Army service, and I think popularized with different books on the Navy SEALs, one of the elite units on the US side, but others have that too. Is really to very very diligently after the fight or after the operation. To really go very, very detailed through what happened. What did we do well? What did we not do well? Right? What can we? And the point here is to keep it completely away from any blame exercise. It's not about finger pointing, even if it was up, right? No matter what, it's not about blaming. It's really completely forward oriented to learning. And try to really, and there's different subset of tools to make it safe, to not put anybody on the spot as blame, but really forward-looking to learn. And I think one observations I have in own boards, but also in all the interviews and surveys I did to learn more about how other boards operate, is that
boards don't self-assess and kind of do a kind of after, when you have a larger board topic, maybe you have a discussion and some decisions on a transaction, on selling the company or buying another company or merging or something. Very rarely do boards after that pause and say, okay, how did we do? Right? How much value did we add? How constructive? Like to what extent did we support the executive team or challenge the executive? So these questions, they're very powerful to keep it a learning body and to progress and advance and get better at these things.
Okay, perfect. And it reminded me of another question was changes in boards or. What do we do? The rotation in boards. Yeah. Not something that was very popular ages ago, but I think...
Yes. So I think traditionally people think of a board appointment as something quite long-term, right? And that there's whole industries in larger companies of executive search firms that place people, and they even have a monetary reward system where if somebody kind of doesn't work out, they reimburse the clients, right? It's really meant for the long term, and there's good reasons for that. That you if you join a complex organization, you don't understand everything from day one. You need a bit of a warm up. So yeah, I understand that part, but I think what the other side of it is underappreciated, and many companies operate in a very fast-moving context. They might be high-growth companies, kind of tech scale-up as a quintessential example of such a case. The environment by changing a lot, so a lot of fast-moving parts. But in such constellations, sometimes a long board term is not what you're looking for. It can be that the case, okay, I need very specific skill set for 2 years. Right, but if you don't make that clear, it's very awkward to ask somebody to step off the board if it's not kind of systematized into it. So I think from that perspective, in many settings, not in all settings, in some settings it can be sense to have relatively short board terms, renewable every year or every 2 years, where you can really pause again and says, is this still the right board? Do we need... An example, I used to work, there's a European company called Northvolt. They actually imploded. They were doing green battery manufacturing out of Sweden. And until they failed, they were by far Europe's best funded startup in quotation. They went from 0 to about 5,000 employees in a few years and had about 12 billion in funding. Like really big, very fast, very big. And they really very intentionally built their board. Their first board incarnation was fundraising. They knew they would, to build huge plants, manufacturing plants, they knew they needed a lot of money. So they had people with a Goldman Sachs background, say for example, right? Rolodex know every single sovereign wealth fund, every family office, every VC, every private equity company can call them, really helpful in supporting the fundraising effort. In the second phase, they had an industrial scale-up composition. They had board directors join that had scaled large industrial operations before, like real manufacturing, right? Those are people, who might have been at GE or ABB or Siemens or the likes, right? That built huge manufacturing plants and scaled those. And the third board was their plans to go IPO at the time. So they had people brought in that gave them credibility and validity to become a public company. Yeah, so they were very strategic and had relatively short board terms and really built the board stage by stage. What do we need? What type of board do we need right now? I think that's very smart thinking.
And where did it go wrong? Was it that?
It's different factors. For one, it was the turnaround away from EVs. Right, okay. Where there was kind of suddenly a trend back against, more against traditional engines and not so big and gung-ho on subsidies and electric vehicles. That was one big aspect, and probably internal side, they might have stretched themselves too thinly too soon, kind of spread out too far, too fast. Kind of an aspect of scaling, but mainly in breadth, they went were not focused enough on their core of the green batteries, but went to the recycling and other stuff.
They stretched them.
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, because it's interesting because it seems like an obvious one. I think you got it exactly like the right. You wouldn't think that would be a failure, but it seems to be a walk back of sorts. I think I saw similar, and I don't know if you would have this experience, but there's a European companies, but in plant-based companies that were going. It was going to be the biggest thing. It was like
totally. Their valuations was in the billions, and now they're back to I don't know what.
Yeah,
totally.
Just
the trend, kind of the momentum, completely shifted away from it. Yes.
Yeah, it's a strange one review because it kind of seems like we have to do it. I haven't updated my firmware or got the updates on why we're not doing it, but and the EVs as well. Yes. Just going. We talked about the beginner's mindset. I think the next one was the last question, and then all that I have for right now. But for out of the notes was this systematic tactics for unleashing the board. The core mission of Make Boards Work, which is your book. Very excited for that release, and we'll have links. We're going to have links in the show notes for purchasing and everything. But Make Boards Work is to unleash private company boards from being necessary statutory chore into an indispensable competitive advantage. You advocate for highly structured rhythms, such as swapping 121-page slide decks out for 6-page concise prose memos. Is this Amazon? Yeah, that's the Amazon
Stolen,
thing.
Exactly. Yes. Shamelessly stolen from Jeff Bezos, right? That they practice all the meetings that way. But I think in the board context again, and I experienced just this week, I think I had a LinkedIn article exactly on that. My worst board meeting was I got a 140-page deck less than 24 hours before the start of the board meeting. I mean, impossible. And to add insult to injury, in the board meeting, went through page by page. Oh, no. So it's like 3 hours of presentation, basically hardly any discussion. I mean, there's no value in that, right? That's just a reporting theater. Absolutely zero value. So I think, why do I favor a short memo over a PowerPoint deck? Because it necessitates and creates more clarity. For the writer, typically the CEO, right? Writing things down in prose forces clear thinking much more than bullet points on PowerPoint. I can fake clarity in PowerPoint till no tomorrow, right? But in prose, I realize and my readers realize, and both are equally important, right? I compare it, in Forum, in EO, we do what we call 5% reflection. So every month we think back and say, okay, what are the really big things that are happening? How do I feel about my business, right? And writing as such a prose thing to the board, kind of what are the key things? What am I proud of? What's going really well in our business? What are some concerns? What causes me sleepless nights? That's true value. What I do with that is I take the luxury of stepping away from the day-to-day grind, to elevate myself to 10,000 to flight attitude and say, okay, what are the big things, right? And that's such a privilege. That's really, there's value in that. I also encourage CEOs to think of that not as a chore for the board, but as a privilege for themselves. And it's much more profound doing that in writing than in bullet points. And on the readership side, on the board side, I get much richer context, which is then the foundation for better discussion, which is the foundation for better decisions. As easy as that.
Perfect. Is that explaining it like a 5-year-old, like we're using the AIs to do now? And something it made me think of is that I think it's a Mark Twain quote where it's apologies for the long letter. I didn't have a chance for a short one. I didn't have time for a long, because it takes time
exactly
and
to
time, energy, and attention to get it done.
What's the essence? And there's so much value in that.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Marc, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
Not. Just one thing that came to mind. It's not necessarily strong on my book, but it just came to me because we came back to this notion of discipline a lot. One little hack that I have on discipline discipline is a good thing. It helps us achieve things, but it can also be a bad thing. It can put a lot of pressure on us, and one little hack I use on all the things that I wanted to be disciplined on, say, for example, daily reading or journaling or sports and all these things, is a kind of a superseding rule of what I call never miss twice. So every once in a while, I'm allowed a joker where I say, okay, today I didn't live up to what I do, but I don't do a second time. Because that's where really the streak gets broken. It's very hard. It starts to be very, if I don't work out for say 2 days, right? Then it might become a trend to not do it, right? But every once in a while, I can, that way, if I have a miss, I don't need to be too harsh on myself. I can be a bit light, and I can kicking it again without feeling too guilty and too shameful. So that works very well for me.
Yeah. No, I love it. That's cool. Never miss twice, huh? And there was, we spoke in the car actually, and this is something that I felt like I spoke a lot about, but your book because your book touches on it, was the strong link, weak link system, and that we were moving towards. So if you could just give that example of the world we're moving towards and like why.
You mean kind of my notion of moving into a leader world?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's something. It's also from a book I've read. I think it's Turn the Ship Around is the title, and it demonstrates very clearly that the whole world is moving into operating in a leader model. What they mean by that is that basically he claims or says like the pyramids, to just give a very kind of clear, the pyramids were built in a leader-follower model, right? One boss and thousands of slaves in that case even, right? Today's world, and that is the family as well as the business side, is much more that people want to operate in a relatively autonomous way, with collaboration, with co-creation, and not very hierarchical. Do this by then, right? And I know there's geographical differences. There's sometimes kind of sector differences that is probably more progressed in software development than, say, in construction, possibly. Right, but the trend is in that direction. Same in the families, right? We used to be very hierarchical in families. We're much more, children have more say and all that. And I think that is fantastic practice ground. It requires different leadership skills. And I think what we do in EO, or also in the army, I think that you can practice that servant leadership, that leading by influence and not by hierarchy, by authority. I think that's very important to hone those skills because that's our current world, more and more. Yeah.
I mean, it was one that I probably should have prompted you to, but it's around EO. It just seems like the obvious one. Like, why EO? Mm-hmm. Like, why would a person watching this now, as an entrepreneur, investigate EO?
Look, I think the founding kind of reason for the organization is still very valid. Very often as entrepreneurs, we're lonely, right? We have these big highs, huge joy when things pan out and work, and we win a new client or product shifts or whatever it is, right? And the lows are super low. Sleepless nights, sweat, fear, pressure on the company. Either I take the pressure home, my kids feel it, whatever it is, right? To have a group that truly gets that has been there, that is there, that understands that, where I can be completely authentic is very, as an entrepreneur, to the outside world. Most of the time, I cannot let anything of that on, right? I need to be this knight in shining armor, everything under control, I got it covered, right? So, and that can create huge internal tensions to have this invincible thing to the outside, but really boiling inside. And in EO, I can be myself. I can talk openly. I can share my successes. I don't get envy. They understand, but I also can share my troubles, right? And that is immensely valuable.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, I'd probably get fired immediately at being the marketing chair for the chapter if I didn't ask that. Who are your incredible machines?
I gave this some thought, and we had a quick chat when we saw each other. I think initially I even had some people that are not among us anymore, and they're very hard to appear on your podcast, so that may be not so helpful. So the person that comes to mind is Professor Angela Duckworth. There's a bit of a bias because she's at the University of Pennsylvania, so my alma mater where Wharton is as well, professor of psychology. Her book, or her very well-known book, is called Grit. And the reason why I admire that book and her, there's several reasons, but one of the key reasons is I think her insights in that book, in Grit, they are at the same time extremely broad as well as deep. And I think that's extremely rare. Broad in the sense what she writes about is applicable in business, in leadership, in sociology, but also in education, in parenting, in family, right? So basically the whole spectrum. And at the same time, it has this immense depth of highlighting. And there's a very, one of the key tenets of the book is is talent is overrated. It's really effort that effort is much more important. And it's a bit counterintuitive in the sense we all admire, or most of us admire talent, right? I played pretty decent tennis as a kid. I admire John McEnroe. Not his behavior, right? That was kind of off and not so much my style, but I think that came with his genius of play. But I think he's still by far, in my view, the most talented player ever, right? I didn't like Ivan Lendl, this Eastern European machine, right? Or Björn Borg, kind of similar, boring style, just hitting back everything, right? Probably in hindsight, I think I should have more respect for what they did. I think nobody had as much talent as John. He was a lazy bum, right? Apparently he practiced much less than everybody else, but he compensated with his superior talent. And I admired that. But her point really is that, we help, for example, in parenting, that's what's most relevant for me, is help our children to develop their passions and understand that passion is not intensity, but it's consistency over time. Right, it's no word to be passionate about chess for 3 months and then okay, now I go and I do karate and then 2 months later I give up again and I go play soccer or whatever, and then I play the flute for three weeks. Right, that's not really. But sampling is okay. You don't have to know your life's destination at age 3 and start playing golf like Rory McIlroy and hit the wash machine at 2 or whatever he did and become the world's best golfer or one of the world's best golfers, right? Some do and discover that early, but it's okay to sample. But the sampling in her parenting or in her education thing, she calls it the hard things rule, right? You don't give up before you have achieved something. Right? So it's okay to sample, it's okay to abandon something, but not prematurely. You don't give up easily. So it's this mix of showing grit, but also being some flexibility. And there's so many nuggets in there, so many incredible. And then the most recent thing she's doing is really, I think, the most in-depth study of the risks of cell phones and kind of online and social media, is again, especially in the educational environment. And again, that these insights are so immensely important that she brings up this notion that physical barriers create psychological barriers. So the implication of that kind of anything that is distracting, keep that far away. Anything that you want to have, keep that close. So she has data, they accumulated data that show kind of completely neutralized for achievers, less achievers and things, that keeping the phone away 3 meters from the desk, those pupils will have better test results. Right? There's just less distractions. Or keep positive things, say healthy food, for example, close by and not unhealthy snacks, say if that's an issue in your life. So visible things, but very data driven, really instructional for education, for schools, because I think it's a huge topic of our children just being too much on screens. There's good sides to that. There's no doubts, and these are tools, and there's healthy things of it, but also things the old world. There's this funny joke about my parents' generation. They struggled with getting me back into the house. Now I struggle to keep to get my kids outside of the house, right? I think there's a lot of value, and she provides data and real instructions how to improve on that.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Thank you so much. Is there anything you would like to close with? Oh, just before we do,
yes,
she's also endorsed the book.
Yes, she did. Yes, was a highlight. I think I got her endorsement end of last week, and it was a big highlight. Yes, yes.
Awesome. Congrats.
Yes, thank
Congrats.
you. Yeah.
Anything you would like to close with?
I think the one thing we didn't touch upon, and I keep it short, is I think also an element that is very, very crucial in boardrooms, but also outside of boardroom, is what Harvard professor Amy Edmondson labeled as psychological safety. The notion, to create an atmosphere where everybody feels kind of safe, feels empowered to speak up. For example, to contradict, to disagree, to ask a question, right? And not be afraid, oh, is this a stupid question or something, but feeling safe. And that is one of those things I say in the board, to prepare a good memo. It's not simple, but we all can do it for board pack, right? To create psychological safety, that's really complex. That so much is needed, and you never win. It's like what Simon Sinek labels an infinite game, right? You always need to work on it. But it's very worthwhile in any team setting to consciously work on it, to elevate the voice, for example, of people who are a bit more silent, right? Help them to be safer, to find out. Maybe you have people in the room that don't have the same native tongue, right? They feel a bit handicapped because their native tongue is not the tongue we have in the room, right? So be very conscious of all these things and elevate these people and make sure, try your best, everybody, especially the board chairperson, to have everybody feel safe. And because that is, you know, some of the worst board screw-ups, among other things, were for lack of, you know, some people realized what was going on but didn't dare to speak up.
Okay. And that, I mean, so there's a couple of things, books that you've triggered in the last, I don't know, and you, an avid reader, you read constantly. So I imagine you've probably read Range. And that was the sporting one. You got me on to thinking about that. And then right now, Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. Yes. That is obviously in the feminist viewpoint, but what you've told me now is like we can lean it across the board, language.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Look out for those biases and Well, thanks so much.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it.
It's been amazing.
Thank you, John.
The incredible Marc Stöckli.